Right, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us again for another Zoom interview, this time with Tracy Story. How are you doing?
All right. Hello, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, no problem. Do you want to sort of start by telling the viewers a bit about yourself, the past, how you came into music, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. Well, I come from Atlanta originally. Uh, Grew up with my granddad and uncles playing guitar, and so that was always around.
Right,
It was that kind of Southern family where it was the immediate family was pretty close, and yeah, I took off from there, and I sort of took it further from there. Got my granddad to thank for getting me my first electric guitar, and just did it for years, jumped in bands wherever I could, playing in people's lounges and
right.
um, eventually getting up to doing, you do the odd gigs, parties, whatever you could do, anywhere you could play live.
Right.
And,
So this was back in the States, yeah?
yeah, yeah, all in Atlanta, although I grew up on the West Coast. Um, we born in Atlanta, grew up on the West Coast, came back to Atlanta. Wasn't until probably I'd say my 20s, early 20s, I started going out and trying to play in venues and
Right.
stuff like that. And it was funny because it would always start out as a cover band. And over there, things are a bit different. Unless you're doing the sort of corporate cover band thing, you find out eventually, well, we're going to get the same money if we play covers or originals. So we might as well play originals.
Mm,
So that's what happened over there. Um, did that for years. Nothing of note to talk about, but a lot of various different genres, everything from punk bands to rock bands
right.
to there was a band called Spacey, which was a weird. So the two main influences in this band were anything that George Clinton did, sort of Parliament Funkadelic, and Hawkwind.
Okay. Wow.
So it was, yeah, it's quite a
Nice.
wild unit to be in. Fantastic guys there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I came over to Cornwall in '99,
Okay.
and so I've always been a bit of a Anglophobe, I think. Not phobe, that's not the right word. Anglophile.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I wouldn't
So
have put it.
you did
Um,
you did you come straight to Penzance or you?
I did, yeah. It was funnily enough, it was the industry I was working in was photography. Well, photography production.
Okay.
Um, and the only two places in all of England was either Cornwall or Newcastle to
Wow.
pursue that.
Wow.
And you look at a map, which one are you going to choose?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think we first met. I think you had a shop on Causeway Head, didn't you?
yeah, I was involved in it. Yeah, I was
Right.
eventually I started teaching there, and then eventually became a part owner of it. And yeah, so and was really successful teaching. Enjoyed my time doing that, and
Right.
then branched out from that into just getting into the local scene. Of course, you get to know all the local musicians.
Yeah.
And it was when I think my friend Frankie Abbott he started a little label, Rio Records, and I thought, well, I'm going to write a CD.
Mm,
And I'd
fair
never
play.
really done it before. I'd written things, but never put it into any cohesive sort of form.
Mm,
And we just recorded that in his coal shed. He used to live down in the Coast Guard flats down there in Penzance.
mm.
And then a few years later, I got involved with Zoe Young, who did the Zoe Pollock. It's whichever she's going by. She did Sunshine on a Rainy Day. And we wrote an album for about a year with a chap called Martin Stansbury. And he did all of the bass and programming, sort of drums and electronic stuff. It never really went anywhere. We didn't really, after that, we didn't really do anything with it.
Mm, right.
So it was a case of I asked Martin if he wanted to record an album for me then. And that's when I did my first all instrumental sort of guitar album. And that was a bit more cohesive with the theme
Right.
as well, because it was called Oh Brother, and it was dedicated to my brother who we lost back in 2005. He was younger than me, about 6 years younger than me, but so everything in that's sort of, I mean, I suppose sort of my approach to instrumental music is you get an idea, maybe a title in your mind, you got a riff and see where that takes you, but you kind of bear that in mind the whole time I'm writing it, and try and tell a story that way.
Mm.
And at the same time, trying to keep it, I do try and keep it 3 or 4 minutes so that it's still digestible. It's
Right.
it's sort of without it becoming sort of a big prog sort of, although I do love that stuff. There's a special place in my heart for it. Um, but I'd like it to, you know, have an appeal that someone could sit down for 3 minutes, listen to a tune and enjoy it, you know.
Right.
Um,
So
but,
where if people wanted to get hold of your music and hear it and listen to it, are you out on all the
um,
platforms?
it's on pretty much all the streaming platforms. It's on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, most of them. I mean, I think if you do any sort of search for it,
Mm. Mm.
although I've got one of those funny names where there's you get tragic stories about people named Tracy who had illnesses.
Okay.
And so as if you put something like Tracy Story music or Tracy Story guitar or something like that, yeah, I think you'll get a better result.
Okay.
Or just searching on the platform that you're using. I think
Okay.
I'm following you a bit. There we go.
That's all right. So you sort of gave me a little insight into you know, how you write.
Hmm.
Do you find the process easy or quite hard?
Once I get into it, it's easy. I think the hardest thing is that sort of my latest track I've done, Acedia, um, is kind of addresses that with uh, the lockdown and everything.
Right.
It's sort of, you've suddenly got all this time that you never had before, and it can also bring in that sort of feeling of existential dread, you know,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
you know, what's it all about? and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it gets quite hard some days, even if you've got nothing to do, but it's hard to get up off the sofa and pick up the
Mm.
guitar, you know.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's always a battle. But once I start going, yeah, it's pretty easy, because
Right. Yeah.
I try to avoid. There's two approaches. I try to avoid having um, a real solid idea in my head of where I want it to finish, and also, you know, at the end of it, being able to accept that it's done, that it is what it's
Right.
going to be.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I could be one of those people who obsesses and obsesses and never puts anything out.
Right. Right.
Because I've found that sort of the process when you're done with it, if you leave it for maybe a week, 2 weeks, don't even listen to it, don't think about it, don't do anything, come back, and then that's your real proving ground. Is like, if you can listen to it then and say, yeah, I'm happy with that,
Right.
then you can let it go,
Right.
and it takes on a life of its own. I
Right.
mean, one other thing, I did work with a band for a while, which very modestly was called the Tracy Story Band, and it wasn't my idea. They just said,
Okay.
we were trying to think of something to call it. They said, just call it that. It's your music, you know. So we did, um, and we've got a whole album that we'll be recording in this room here, with electric drums and everything. But
Okay.
I've got some really nice software which uh, does some convincing samples. So
Right.
we'll
Yeah.
be recording that long overdue stuff, because we haven't been active for many years now. So
Yeah, I mean, you said you mentioned that track that your latest one. How do you
yeah,
pronounce it? How do
Acedia.
Acedia, yes.
Yeah,
I listened to it the other night, and it's hard. You know, I know technology and everything is fantastic nowadays, but it's hard to sort
mm,
of, you know, the quality of that.
yeah.
Um, to think that it's, you know, from one room and one person, you know, it's quite
Oh,
amazing.
oh, well, thanks very much. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of technology these days. I mean, I find one of the things I use a lot that I'm a big proponent of is a company called TuneTrack, and they do some fantastic software. It's
Mm.
like for the drums. that's all their stuff, and they record live drums. And the software that it comes in is ingenious. I mean, the way you can put a tune together is phenomenal.
Mm.
And that's what I'll use on the band stuff as well. Is I'll
Okay.
bring the electronic drums and then revoice them. But also
Right.
another thing that they do mixing sort of parameter, like chains of effects that you can put on and go through, and sort of you can get a really decent sound out of it. I think, you
Mm.
know.
Right.
Um,
So would
so
the
I mean,
idea be in the future, is this the sort of, could you gig with the sound that you produce now? Could that be redone?
well, I never say no. Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean,
Yeah.
I try not to do anything that's impossible to produce that way. Although I don't know if it'll be done. I mean, I'll never say never. It's not in my mind at the moment,
Okay.
because I have, I've done the cover band scene. I had my own cover band for a while with a couple of buddies called The Frame. We did that for about 4 or 5 years, of
Mm.
running around the pubs. Then I was in the High Voltage, really popular
Yeah.
cover classic
Yeah.
rock band for about the last year. And I was
Okay.
enjoying it. It was just a case of when that break came, I sort of thought, well, I miss recording and I miss
Right.
writing. And
Right.
because it takes up
Yeah.
a lot of your time, because I mean, I've got to work a day job
Mm.
to live any sort of life. And you do that all through the week. And then
Right.
you gig all weekend long, and soon you've got no time. And then lockdown
Yeah.
happened. It was like, I've got all this time to do this. So I built the studio up.
Do you think the process of writing music and stuff is more creative than being on stage playing live?
More creative, maybe, in that you're creating more, but then it depends on how you approach it as a player. I
Right.
mean, because even in the cover bands that I've been in, it was never about picture perfect performances of the original material. It was more about doing an interpretation
Yeah.
of the material. And you can be quite creative with that. The solos don't have to be the same every night. I mean, you would do some songs that, if you're going to do Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, you kind of got to do the solo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Or
are a few.
Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd's got to be pretty close.
Yes. Yeah.
um,
So I mean, daft question now. I mean, if you could, either with one of the bands or as a solo artist, if you could open for any band, past or present, who would be your choice?
wow. If I was going to open for someone, it's I'd say probably Cheap Trick. Yeah,
Nice.
they're one of my favorite bands, and have been for years. I'm wearing a T-shirt. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love those guys, and they're still on form. I've seen them twice since I've been in England, and
Uh,
they're edging up to their 70s, and they
wow.
still sound as vital as
I,
they did,
I think
in the 70s.
yeah, I think I first heard. I think the album was called. Was it Live at the Budokan?
Yeah,
That was the
yeah,
first time I heard them, and it was like, yeah, this is fantastic.
yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
just something else. I
yeah,
mean, it's poppy, but it's also they go so many places. People write them off with their singles, but
yeah,
they do so much and so varied. And yeah, definitely one of my favorite bands, and it'd be a real honor to. I'm trying to get a message to them. Actually, I've bought tickets to go see them twice, if it happens, if we're allowed,
yeah,
in April. Um, because of their age and everything, who knows how many more chances I'll get?
yeah.
Because I normally wouldn't, sort of try to go see someone twice on a tour, because we don't get it down here, do we? We've got to
No, yeah,
travel.
that's it.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but the I'm trying to get a message and say, please, can I play one song with you? Just one. Poor
Fantastic.
boy,
Imagine
dreams
that.
come true. But
Yeah,
you never know. It's
yeah.
worth a go. You don't ask, you don't get.
No, I agree with that totally. Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I mean, I started doing all of this sort of a couple of years ago. Initially, it was in the front room. People would
Mm,
come in and we'd do an interview and stuff. But because of the lockdown, I decided I wanted to carry it on.
yeah,
So this was a format I chose. But it always amazes me the wealth of sort of music and talent that is down in West Cornwall.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
I found that
crazy.
coming down here. I mean, when I first moved down, it took probably probably about 8 or 9 months, because when you move somewhere, you don't know, you know, what's going on. And I saw
Yeah,
a few things here and there that wasn't really for me. But then there was, when I got involved in the jam sessions,
yeah,
um, and we used to do them down at the Admiral Bembo, and I quickly latched onto that scene, and I met all these legendary characters of the
yeah,
scene, like
yeah,
Ollie the busker, and who,
yeah,
rest in peace. But
yeah,
and Lawrence, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy called Lawrence who used to organize them. He didn't really play, but he was so instrumental in getting these things vital.
yeah.
And he looked a bit like Roger Waters, but such a character and so fantastic.
Brilliant.
And that's when it really opened up. And you thought, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and not just with those sort of older musicians, teaching. There was a lot of the young guys who come up and are still coming up now that are just really
Yeah,
talented.
yeah.
You know,
I mean, I'm hoping that obviously once we come out of all of this COVID thing, because it's been such a crush for live music,
yeah,
whether how long it'll take before it develops back to where it was,
yeah,
whether it's going to be this slow grinding crawl to it or whether it'll just come back with a bang, you know.
yeah. It's hard to tell, isn't it? It really is. I mean, I think a few people have seen a few venues trying it and trying
Yes.
to bring it back,
Yeah.
but then having to pull back again.
Yeah, and
So
I think it's
it's
also it's almost like a catch-22 in the sense that because the venues haven't got the people in, so
mm,
hence they can't afford to pay the band. Not
yeah,
that not that there was ever a lot of money to be made in that sort of circuit, but
yeah.
I think it'll be even less over the next few years. But
I would have thought so. Yeah,
yeah, and
um,
well, we'll see, we'll see.
yeah. We'll
So
see.
what's the future then for Tracy Story? What's the
Well, funnily enough, I've just signed. I'm trying to do this properly now. I've just signed with signed with. It makes it sound bigger than it is. I've registered with BMI
Okay.
to try and track any sort of little small amounts of money that might happen from streaming and things. And I'll continue with the instrumental music because it's what I love sort of doing and writing. Um, and hopefully that would lead and lend itself to sort of syncing and getting it into
Mm.
films, TVs,
Right.
adverts. I
Right.
mean, I'd love to have a on a toothpaste commercial would suit me fine, you know.
Fantastic.
But
Fantastic.
that sort of thing, and going to get the instrumental stuff recorded with the band that we've never done because there's a whole CD of material there
Yeah.
that's not been recorded.
Right.
So that's what I'm up to.
Okay. Nice. Do you have any sort of videos or soundtracks on YouTube?
Yeah, there's a channel up,
Okay.
just under my name again, Tracy Story, no
Okay.
e's. Um,
Yeah.
there's lot of live footage and everything, and the people who I distribute my stuff through, they also put up. That's also available on the YouTube Music.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
I'm going to look through because normally what I do is I tag a couple of videos onto the interview. So I mean, I don't know
sure.
if you've got any choice of two that you want me to put up.
Well, I've just put up. There is a video for Acedia, which I
Okay.
used. I used a stock footage site for that,
Yeah.
uh, but I think it works well. There's
Okay.
nice little clip, some live stuff up there. Just whatever you think
Okay.
is worth putting up, mate.
Okay, I shall do that after this. Right, coming up to the end now, mate, and I'm going to ask that question I ask everybody.
Yep.
Is there anybody you'd like to thank for you being here musically now?
The big one is my granddad. You know, because without his support, he gave me a really good start. I mean, just the fact of him and my uncles playing, and he was the one who got me my first guitar and my first amp, and made me seem like a spoiled child because I mean we didn't come from a wealthy family, but he got me a Fender Lead 2, which
Mm,
is probably the late '70s, early '80s version of a Squire.
mm,
Um,
yes.
and but the amp was the killer that kills everybody. It was a Fender Super Reverb.
Wow. Yeah,
Now
yeah.
I had to show I was serious. It took me, I think, a year and a half to get that amp, and that's what it was. So yeah, without his support, I never would have got as far probably as I had, because he believed in me.
Brilliant. Tracy, look, thanks so much for the time. Great interview. Brilliant talking to you.
Yeah, and you, Craig. It's good seeing you, mate.
All
Good seeing
right.
your face. It's been a while.
Yes, yeah, it's been a while, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so good luck with everything, mate, and chat soon.
And you, yeah, keep up the good work. This is really, really a great series, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for including me.
All right, see you later.
All right, take care. Thanks.